Tonight we're going to focus on the most important problem facing our nation today, at least according to you and I, the American people. And I'd love to know what you feel is the most important problem we have right now as a nation. You can text us. We're going to get to your points of view here in just a few moments. Good evening and welcome to 630 Point of View. I'm Chris Berg. Thanks so much for joining us. According to a recent Gallup poll, right now 16% of Americans now identify terrorism as the single most important problem we face as a nation. You can see here coming in second is the government, third the economy, and fourth is guns, believe it or not. But to put this terrorism number in some perspective, just over a month ago, just over 30 days ago, think about this, only 3% of Americans said that terrorism is the most important problem that we face as a nation. This is a five-fold increase in just the last 30 days. What's also very fascinating about this poll is that the mentions of the economy being our nation's most important problem are at the lowest levels since 2007. So obviously, recession type of levels here. So the obvious question, we saw this last night in the GOP debate, what should our leaders be doing to keep us safe and also quell our fears of terrorism? So with us tonight live from Washington, D.C. to talk about this, and also big vote coming up this Friday on a 2,000-plus page omnibus, ginormous, whatever they call it, bill, Congressman Kevin Cramer. Congressman Cramer, always great to have you with us, sir. Appreciate you taking the time. Let's start here with national security because of that poll, and I believe what's on everybody's minds these days. I know you were in a very important meeting last night, didn't get a chance to watch the actual debate, but you know these candidates. When you look at these candidates, who do you feel, if they were to step into the Oval Office, would do the best job protecting the American people, destroying ISIS and or terrorism, and what is it about their policies that you think they would be able to accomplish this?
Well, there are a couple of things I'd say right away, Chris. And first of all, thanks for the opportunity. And you're right, I didn't get to see the debate last night, but knowing all of the players on the stage, I'm quite confident any one of them would do a much better job than the current president or Hillary Clinton would do, because neither one of them seems to articulate a message that would keep us safer. Having said that, among the Republicans that are on the stage last night, I think it's pretty obvious that certainly Donald Trump talks the toughest, and I don't see any reason to doubt his resolve in the area of national security or safety. And I think it's clear that the senators, both Rubio and Cruz, have good experience in it in terms of understanding the issue. I shouldn't say they have a good experience, but they have good knowledge of the issues and certainly resonate the right message. Obviously, I think Chris Christie, you have to give credit to him for having been a governor and executive during the aftermath of 9/11. There are a number of them that I think are well prepared to do it. They might have a little different tactic or a little different approach to it, but all of them see radical Islamic terrorism as a major threat, and they're at the very least willing to admit that that is a problem and are willing to put forward policies that would do that. Now, certainly, Donald Trump talked about the wall at the southern border long before San Bernardino or Paris. He talked about the restriction of Muslim travel. A lot of people thought that was a bridge too far. That said, it's certainly a better plan than accepting all refugees from everywhere, no matter what. So there's a clear difference between the parties, for sure.
So just to be clear, because what I'm hearing you say is, hey, you know what, maybe Mr. Trump wasn't off by too much. Are you supporting, obviously not American citizens, but if they're not American citizens, hey, no Muslims can enter this country right now for at least some time?
I don't support that as a general policy, Chris, but I also am not afraid to say that we have to acknowledge that while not all Muslims are terrorists, all terrorists are Muslims, and certainly regions of the country and the vetting process has been woefully inadequate, which is why we passed the SAFE Act overwhelmingly in the House, and why this omnibus spending bill, or ginormous spending bill you talked about, includes the visa waiver program reforms that the House passed with 407 votes just a couple of weeks ago. So I think we have to acknowledge and be smart about the process of vetting. And up to this point, it's been considered bigoted to vet people based on their backgrounds and the regions from which they come, and I think it's time to get over it.
I'm going to get to the visa waiver program and obviously this omnibus bill in a moment, but one of the things that came up last night that I thought was a really interesting question to ask, and I want to get your thoughts on this. When you look at America's interests, because I think all of us here are saying, hey, how do we protect the homeland? How do we protect Americans? Most importantly, should we, looking back, have allowed these dictators to stay in power and stop this regime change? You look at, obviously, Mubarak out of Egypt. You look at Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi. Would America and the homeland and Americans be better off if we would have simply left them in power?
Well, I don't know, Chris, because every time you take out a dictator or a despot, there's another one to follow. Certainly the old guard dictators, if you want to put it that way, provided a bit of a stabilizing force. But that said, none of this has ever been easy, and we shouldn't oversimplify it. The old, enemy of my enemy is my friend policy has been the policy of the United States and lots of countries over the decades. It's served fairly well, but also does create some confusion. But we're still having that kind of confusion. You look at somebody like an Assisi in Egypt or the King of Jordan, who are certainly much friendlier to us than others that we play nice with. We play nicer with Iran, who we know wants to take us out, than we do, say, with Assisi in Egypt, who frankly has a stronger statement against radical Islamic terrorism than our own president does. I don't want to oversimplify it on the one hand. On the other hand, clearly there's a conflict of visions and worldview.
So quickly, yes or no, do you support keeping Assad in power?
I think that whoever the enemy of Assad is an enemy of ours, but I also don't want to get confused and ever consider Assad as a friend. I'm not crazy about keeping Assad in power. In fact, some have argued that the best policy in Syria is to support whoever the rebels are fighting Assad. So no, I'm not. I don't think so, because Assad, frankly, is just a surrogate for Iran, and I know that the United States is taking a different tack toward Iran now than I would. But that said, no, I don't support.
But that's the conflict, as you just mentioned. Hey, Chris, as we knock these dictators out, it just creates a vacuum for another dictator or despot to come in. And I mean, let's be honest. This thing is a tinderbox. It's not easy. But I did want to get you on record about some of those things. One last thing,
Sure.
Speaking about this war, we had Senator Hoeven on a while back. I've heard a lot of your colleagues say the same thing. They say, Chris, we are at war right now with terrorism. My question to you is one, why isn't Congress putting this up for a vote? I've got Article 1, Section 8. Congress is the one who shall declare war. Why aren't you guys saying, hey, Chris, we're going to go put this up at a vote. We're going to show our allies and our enemies that we are united as a nation, and we are going to vote to stand as saying, yes, this is a formal declaration of war. When are you guys going to do that?
Well, first of all, the war has been declared on us. I don't know why we're confused by it. Secondly, one of my concerns about, for example, the president has brought, he brought to us a year or two ago a new authorization to use military force against the Islamic State, as an example, except that it was such a weak authorization that the authorizations he already has as an extension of previous authorizations is a far stronger one. Perhaps a stronger statement by Congress itself, a stronger declaration would embolden him to be a little tougher. I think much of the problem, frankly, Chris, is the commander-in-chief and the lack of trust we have in his ability or even political will to execute a real war.
At least then come together from both chambers and put something on his desk that maybe has more teeth on it. I mean, I think people are kind of going, hey, the 2001 AUMF is, probably extended itself here. Let's get this thing formalized and really let these enemies know that we're going to go after them.
I think it's a reasonable request and worthy of our consideration.
All right, let's talk about this omnibus bill. You mentioned something about the visa waiver program. If you want to clear that up for people, that would be great. But here's my concern, and Senator Sessions had a great piece about this, saying, hey, now in this omnibus bill, you guys still basically gave President Barack Obama an open checkbook as far as the refugee program. He came out with a list recently of 30 people that have now come over here, some of them refugees, some of them through different programs that are very closely tied or been implicated as far as terrorism. Why didn't you guys get this done to say, hey, you know what, let's put the power back to Congress about these refugee resettlement programs rather than giving President Barack Obama an open checkbook?
Well, with all due respect to Senator Sessions, the House of Representatives passed a bill that does exactly that. We passed it with a veto-proof majority. And one of the conditions we received in writing, I might add, from the Senate Majority Leader was that they would take the House passed bill up early next year on a standalone bill, which I think would give it much more weight. But the bigger problem is that in this negotiated omnibus bill, the president threatened to veto should we do that. So I would love to have had it in there. It was part of our negotiating position in the House. But as I said, we did pass it with a veto-proof majority after the president threatened to veto, I might add. So we got a lot of Democrats on the bill. We should be able to pass it in the Senate. It's up to the senators, of course, to get their veto-proof majority, and so far they've been pretty unable to do that with anything. But nonetheless, we've given them the momentum, and certainly, and by the way, so have the terrorists. I mean, I don't know, when you've cited the polls at the beginning of the show, I don't know how much more incentive they need to pass the SAFE Act with overwhelming majority and get the president to sign it. But you're right, it was disappointing. It's not in the omnibus. I wish it would have been, but that wasn't the will of the Senate or the president.
Congressman, I want to give you a minute here because I know you were on the floor today for half an hour speaking about the lifting of the oil export ban. Obviously a great thing, I would believe, for North Dakota, but I want to give you a chance to speak to that and where we're at with that right now.
Well, it was a high priority for Republicans in both the House and the Senate to have the lifting of the crude oil export ban as part of the omnibus spending bill. And we should also mention that it's not just the omnibus spending bill, but the attached piece, which is, of course, the tax extender package, which has a lot of important priorities for North Dakota, not the least of which is permanently allowing the deduction of 179 expensing at the $500,000 level. But the crude oil export ban is part of it. We had to pay a political price for it, but I think at the end of the day, negotiate a pretty good balance on doing that. But there are lots of reasons for it. Job creation, to create 1 million jobs in all 50 states collectively. But probably the greatest issue, I think that the greatest strength of it, is back to the Middle East. Remember, the crude oil export ban was a result of the oil embargo in 1973, which was the result of the Yom Kippur War, where Soviet Union backed Syria's attack on our ally Israel, and that's what led to the crude oil export ban. Today you have Vladimir Putin in Russia, moving it into Syria, involving itself in the Middle East to a greater degree, pushing into Europe. The Russian bear is back, quite frankly, and here we have we can't even sell oil to our friends in Israel because they're dependent on Russia for their oil. So there are national security interests that are very timely right now for lifting this ban.
Congressman Kevin Cramer, we always appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you soon, okay?
Pleasure's always mine. Go Bison.
Amen to that. We're talking about Bison actually right after this. First, I do want to know your thoughts from our audience. Text the show. Should there be a vote put up for an authorization for the use of military force or not? What are your thoughts on how do we obviously get rid of this terrorism and quell the fears that are now spreading across America? As Congressman Cramer just said, go Bison. Coming up next, it's our Bison Breakdown segment with the one and only Beth Hool. We'll be right back.